Year Grand Rising. So we're living in the age of Aquarius, or for the religious individuals out there, the age of revelation, where all truths are being revealed. And that being said, I know a lot of us feel certain ways and get upset when I say certain things, but my job is to make sure that the information is getting to my people. And civil rights has been a complete psyop. And I always say, follow the money and you'll see the recurring pattern. But the same people who fund our government now with lobbying money, as in nonprofits like AIPAC, the one that fund most of the Democrats, AIPAC. But the same people that came together and created AIPAC are the same people that fund the Southern Poverty Law Center, right? But we know the Southern Poverty Law Center. They were the organization that was deeply tied to the movement through landmark civil rights litigation, the tracking of white supremacist groups, and public education, right? But again, this is all part of the PSYOP. Intelligence Project, formerly the Klan Watch, memorialization and education, ongoing advocacy, right? Would seem like on paper a great organization to help POCs and marginalized people, just like the NAACP, who oddly enough, they were funded and co-created by the same exact people that funded and co-created the Southern Poverty Law Center and AIPAC. Oddly enough, the same exact money pool. Interesting. Well, let's see. The Southern Poverty Law Center was indicted by the United States Department of Justice on federal money fraud and laundering charges for allegedly misleading donors by secretly funneling millions of dollars to informants inside white supremacist and extremist organizations. Not the nigger lovers. Not the nigger lovers. But it's a pattern because W.E.B. Du Bois, Miss Bethune, and Adam Clayton Powell did the same thing for Margaret Sanger, and I already did a video explaining to you exactly who Margaret Sanger was. Yeah, this is diabolical, dirty work, ladies and gentlemen. Diabolical, dirty work. In separate revelation, the top former Southern Poverty Law Center official was accused of romantic involvement with the neo-Nazi informant and allegedly funneling roughly $1.2 million in donor pay Purdue his accounts over several years. Wow. Ain't that something? All right, now here, as I always tell you, in theater, which is actually just a cover for one of the hidden mystery schools, because that's why all dreams come true in Hollywood. And if you understand the etymology of Hollywood, which is the wood that comes from the holly tree, which warlocks and magicians used to make magic wands, or witches used to make they flying brooms. The druids. Yeah, it's all about witchcraft. But anyways, if you know, you know. But again, right, exposing the method. Well, it's the same thing in magic. Not with a C, but a K. That real shit where you can incant demons and bind and use. Anyways, if you know, you know. But exposing the method. They always have to tell you and show you who they are so that you acquiesce of your free will. So none of this information is hidden. People just don't want to believe it. So let's go back to 2018 when John Stossel told us back then, over a decade ago, because it's 2026. So 12 years ago, John Stossel told us that the Southern Poverty Law Center was a PSYOP. So we should have been known, but nobody wants to listen because our liberal handlers that we don't realize are the actual white supremacists that we've been conditioned and indoctrinated and brainwashed to work for, because that's why there's a whole POC and marginalized coalition Because they've convinced black Americans to go out and fight for everyone's fight. That's why y'all niggas are outside right now marching for illegal aliens that Kamala Harris, the Southeast Indian, Asian, let across the border when she was the border czar. And y'all lying to yourself as if Joe Biden didn't say that bitch was the border czar. Because she's black. Anyways.
There are dangerous hate groups in America who will warn us about them. The media haven't answered.
The Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center.
The Southern Poverty Law Center, based in that building in Alabama, calls itself the premier group monitoring hate groups. Looking at their map of such groups, you'd think America was consumed by hate. I once believed in the center's mission. Well-meaning people still do. Apple just gave them $1 million. But what donors don't know is that today the center smears people who don't deserve to be smeared.
The presence of radical Islam.
This woman grew up in Somalia, suffered female genital mutilation. So now she speaks out against
the Ilhan Omar Psyop that we fought for so they could get in government as naturalized citizens.
These communities.
And then they had access to the war chest. And you wonder why fraud's happening.
Then he decided radical Islam was wrong, and now he criticizes the radicals. The center labels him an anti-Muslim extremist, too.
Join the fight against hate and bigotry.
Visit splcenter.org.
I do think that we have a problem with hate in this country.
We put about 10 of these major hate groups out of business.
The center's leaders, Richard Cohen and Morris Dees, would not talk to me. So commentator Nomiki Kant stepped up to defend them.
They have a long history of fighting against extremists like the KKK.
History?
They are the KKK.
They labeled skeptical Muslims like Ayaan Hirsi Ali as haters.
If you have a horrible experience with religion, that's one thing. It's another thing to use those experiences as ammunition against others who are practicing their religion peacefully.
But they're just speaking, criticizing it.
Of course she has the right to free speech, as does the Southern Poverty Law Center has a right to push back.
We can stand together against hate.
The center also...
You know what I've really come to realize about free speech? People only like the protection of free speech when it's their free speech. That's a fact. Sad it's that way, but freedom of speech is just that. Now, doesn't mean it absolves you of consequence. But people should be free to say whatever they feel as long as it's not impeding on others' civil liberties or rights. So if you feel that XYZ, that's your right to say so. And you don't have to like it. So it's your right to either respond, to rebut, or to mind your business and keep fucking moving. But let me get on track to the psyop that we continue to fall for. So, am I making this up? Do I got to go back and run the tape on Margaret Sanger? Do I got to go back and run the tape on the president? You know what? Hold on 1 minute. Yeah, so I'm back. But anyways, Hermeticism, 7 Hermetic principles, and all the things that govern reality, and about free will. You better learn about these things because that's what they're using against us. And now again, back to exposing the method. They have to tell you what they're doing before they do it so that you give up your free will. None of this is new. We're just under a spell and in a time loop, and they've always been doing this, and they've always been telling you they've been doing this, and they've been using you and your energy to fight for the civil rights of these people because birthright citizens don't need civil rights. You know what? Anyways, let's go.
Realize, and transparency forces accountability. Y'all keep your eyes to the stars.
Pay attention to the date.
Keep that head on a swivel, and remember, it's a dirty game.
When we did the Lillian Richardson case,
2018,
she was on probation in Arkansas for a felony Medicaid fraud conviction.
You don't say.
And she was running 50 different shell companies. By shell company, I mean a fraudulent, non-existent company up here in Minnesota using her family members to extort, to to use fraudulent means to extract money from the DHS Medicaid program.
Sound familiar?
That's in the newspaper. You can
2018.
look at that. When we stopped counting the loss, it was 18 million. I know it was higher than that. A week after she was released from jail, I was told she was up and running again and started the same businesses and was collecting money from DHS because the controls,
the learning center,
the checks and balances prevented them from shutting her down again. Barb Curran, look in the news. She's in Shakopee prison. She ran a $5 million organized crime ring from her prison cell using a state computer.
Gangster. I
asked the state agency if I could have that computer so I could track the money, and they would not give me that computer.
This is why Ilhan Omar
there was a way to find that money to get that $5 million back, but we never got that money back because we don't know where it went.
Kamala's homie.
Possible to find out? Absolutely.
They're playing in our faces. And they're protecting the people that they put in to steal the money.
Is a newspaper, and you can check that out.
Where's the money going, though?
There's some other programs at DHS as well that I know of that where they teach people to train immigrants, where they teach them how to find a job. And most of those, the one recently that was in Hennepin County Court for a trial just a few months ago, he used the money to have a harem of females. He had 12 females, and that's how his lifestyle was. That's how he used the money he received for that program. Not all of it, but a good substantial part of it. The internal controls on these programs really need to be examined. I think
2018, ladies and gentlemen.
And I really appreciate you having me here today to talk about this because I think
he's talking, but nobody listening.
I do think that there's
if you say something, you're xenophobic, racist.
I think there are lives at stake. And if I could just take a story,
you one of them.
Every time there was a terrorist attack, Paris, San Bernardino, France, Paris, even the Syrian war. We would, as investigators, we would get together the day after the attack and we would ponder amongst ourselves, how much Minnesota taxpayer dollars was being used to fund that war, that attack? What bought that gun? Where'd that money come from?
I'm going to leave that there because all of the historical record is documented. Stop paying attention to what they put in those Macmillan textbooks brought to you by Pergamon Press, The Throne of Satan. Pergamon Press, which was owned by Ghislaine Maxwell's daddy, Epstein's old lady. I said that before. I've shown you the paper trail. The Mossad agent, AIPAC money. AIPAC money. SPLC, AIPAC money. NAACP, AIPAC money. That's your white supremacy. Ask a Nazi. Graham. Yeah. But I'm tweaking.